Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Nick, and here's what he has to say. Hey Sandman, hi everyone, I'm Military Nick. I've been listening perhaps for over a year now. Your channel was the first MGTOW content I consumed, and I must say that I'm better off for it. I've been enlisted in the US Marines for 3 years now and have actually seen my fair share of the US military, and the mindset within. We saw ourselves as the nation's hellhounds, but this is being blunted. I hear the Salt Dogs Gunny's E7 grade, those who are most likely on their third re-enlistment period, say how the Corps has become a bunch of pansies. And let me tell you what I see. Back in the day, if you had a problem with another service member, you'd meet out in the back, ranks off, and get on with it. Now there's so much paperwork, like you're a civilian getting reprimanded. This, among many other reasons stated by my peers and myself, are why I'm getting out after 4 years. But the reason I decided to write this is because, while here on a bus filled with Marines, I've noticed something funny to us MGTOWs. There's at most 1 or 2 female Marines on the bus at a time. I've seen 3 times now that when they file into the seats, no male sits next to them, giving them as wide a berth as they reasonably can. Talk about this, please. In closing, I wish to leave the audience with this. My sergeant in this schoolhouse would actually tell us before each and every single safety brief before leaving for the weekend, alcohol, driving, and girls should never be mixed. This formed the triangle he told us that we should never break. Well, Military Nick, thanks for your donation as well as your topic. Isn't it obvious why many guys in the Marines avoid those females on the bus? It's all about any and all possible false allegations. You also don't want to deal with the paperwork and be written up for supposedly harassing a woman and have your career ruined. Another possible reason that none of you guys wants to sit next to them is to make women feel uncomfortable so that they'll leave the unit. Not being inclusive of women means that they will tend to break down emotionally because attention and acceptance are what women crave more than men do. But what's really disturbing about this situation is that there's always the watchful female eye keeping tabs on men and destroying the opportunity for men to build natural bonds away from women. This leads to a crisis in masculinity down the line, because men are allowed to express themselves. Not because they aren't allowed to, but because subconsciously we alter our behavior when women are watching, like there's some sort of gynocentric Gestapo. Another reason men will not actually sit next to women in the military bang bus is because if they do, the other guys will think that you're thirsty for sitting next to the female Marine. After all, you don't want to be perceived as the weak comedy relief figure like Hudson from the Aliens movies, getting rejected and shot down by that muscle-bound Latina. Feminists would probably say that your sergeant is a misogynist because he says that alcohol and girls shouldn't be mixed. That destroys a woman's natural habitat, the dance club. I visited San Diego bars back in the mid-noughties, and I didn't realize I wandered into a military bar with a friend of mine and my brother. Tattoos were still pretty rare back then, and the female sailors were covered in them. I guess it was their attempt to show that they can just take as much pain as the men did. But I digress. Another possible reason that male Marines don't want to sit next to female Marines is that most of you guys probably know that the odds of dying in a firefight are higher if you have a woman in your platoon or whatever else it's called these days. Women need to understand it's not just about their feelings on the line, but it's also potentially men's lives. I see the situation as getting worse and worse. I shared a video in the description called Why the Military Can't Find Any Recruits, and it's a conversation between Joe Rogan and Tim Kennedy. In it, Tim says that out of the 100 people that apply for the Special Forces, only about 6 or 8% of them get in. Tim Kennedy says that the military doesn't have enough good people to pick from because young guys aren't playing sports and they're overweight and not intelligent enough. He also says it's harder to get into the regular military than it is to get into college. Unless, of course, you're talking about an elite place like Harvard. I'm predicting that in the future the social justice nonsense is going to mean less qualified people available for the military. Either the military will have to basically recruit less people and use more technology like robots to do the fighting for them, which would be the best option, or they will actually have to lower their entry standards and droves of women will come into it. I don't like the fact, Nick, that guys that actually have a grudge between one another are not allowed to fight it out in back, and then just go about their business without filling out any paperwork. Check out the MGTOW movie moment in the description to see what I mean. When the boss is away, the employees are left to play. But if the boss is always watching or a woman is always watching, then normal male behavior can't be expressed. Nick, you also said that 1 or 2 Marines on your bus are always women. The statistics say that 7.6% of Marines out there are now women. So statistically, you guys are lucky that there aren't more of them serving with you. As I mentioned earlier, it's harder for all branches of the military to recruit and keep people in them these days. The more women they let in, the less welcoming of an environment it'll be for men. So more guys such as yourself will decide to leave only after a 4-year tour. I'm sure you would actually have stayed longer if it was more flexible and it had more freedom for you. But I'm predicting that women will make up more of the military personnel in the future. Recently I read an article called Breaking Up the Underwater Boys Club about a female doctor that rode around on some submarine deployments. Women seem to think that they can now serve on submarines, but they aren't allowed to. But there are medical reasons why they can't. If a woman has an ectopic pregnancy, which means she gets pregnant while on a submarine, the baby will most likely be born with a birth defect. While these types of pregnancies are rare, they would most likely require an immediate evacuation, possibly in the middle of the ocean. There are also the issues of having to give women their own quarters on a submarine, and conditions on such ships are already cramped. One of the women criticizing the Navy for not letting women on submarines said that the silent service is not a boys' club, and that this is a serious matter. Someone should tell women that yes, it is a serious matter because subs carry nuclear weapons, and have to be ready to deploy them at any time. They can't be whisking pregnant female sailors out of the sea secretly while expecting to stay quiet off the coast of Russia, always ready to deploy their payloads. When I was in high school, I considered joining the Canadian Armed Forces. But firstly, my parents would have killed me, and second, I could run and do all the strength tests required, but the 12-minute run kept killing me. I couldn't get enough oxygen into my lungs. Being muscular wasn't an issue at all. I can't run marathons as my body doesn't actually get enough oxygen in it for some reason. That was with me having a huge lung capacity from playing the saxophone every day. No matter how much I tried to increase it, it was like I had asthma or something, and would choke on mucus when running long distances and fall over out of breath. I also didn't like sports, but I would work out for about an hour or two per day. I also wouldn't mind carrying stuff with a purpose. Another reason I didn't actually want to join is because I'd probably get stationed up in Resolute Bay, the northernmost military base in Canada. It's cold even when compared to Alaska. Another article, Nick, that I found that could explain why men in the Marines avoid women is called "Over 400 Female Marines Are Pressuring the Military Branch to Treat Women Better." And it too is in the description. The article is from the New York Times and it's vague, and it says that the Marines is a culture where women are devalued, demeaned, and their contributions diminished, unquote. But at the same time, there are no examples of how this is happening to women. Looks to me like the Marines have things figured out the best. They figured out the best way to make women upset is to show them indifference. That's what happens to the women on your buses. They get ignored. But they don't want the media and social justice to ignore their goals. Their goal is to increase their numbers. What feminists, social justice warriors, and women in general need to learn from is Jeff Goldblum in the Jurassic Park movie, when he says, "You're so preoccupied as to whether or not you could do something that you didn't stop to think if you actually should." That's where women are with regards to equality in the military. Could there be more female Marines? Sure, but should there be more female Marines is a better question. The Marines are the only branch of the military opposing the Pentagon's plans to integrate women into combat roles. You'd think that the Special Forces would do the same, but they don't care because, as I mentioned, only 6 to 8% of the guys getting in complete the training successfully. I believe the Marines have a slogan, "The few, the proud, the Marines." Well, it's even more intense to get into the Special Forces. I'd suggest that men joining the military join the Special Forces if they're cut out for it, instead of actually the Marines. But apparently even that might actually be a bad idea because women have gone on Special Forces missions. First, they were allowed to go on operations with the cultural support teams in Afghanistan and gather information from Afghan women. That makes perfect sense. But many of the men on the mission saw them as a hindrance. Cultural support teams are not actual units of Special Forces. They're just attached to them. So I doubt that they would have to receive and pass the same type of training. It's a technical way for women to get into Special Forces by tagging along, like that female doctor on a submarine. Special Forces is impossibly hard to get into and complete training for, even if you're a man, and women would surely not be able to pass the training. It's not discrimination against women. It's discrimination against the weak and stupid regardless of if they're male or female. But women will still assume that it's all about them. Some of the so-called arguments against the male Marines is that they put up nude photos of female Marines. I can't comment on that because I don't know enough about it, nor do I care to see pictures of Private Vasquez that way. The real issue is that women in the Marines erode unit cohesion, and the men in the Marines are building up mental barriers to the women in their units because you guys don't want to see them as part of the unit, because you know that they're unreliable in a bad situation. You don't have confidence in their abilities. To women, this just appears to be misogyny, and therefore all of you have to be punished for it. If women want to go into combat, then I suggest we create all female units and have a male unit on standby as backup. Send the feminist Patsy Pawns in first, and then send the men in to clean up the mess. It's about time we valued male lives more than female lives. But that's not what women want. They want to be embedded in a group of men to take credit for their sacrifice and hard work. They want to roll around in men's mojo and bask in the glory without having to take the same risks and responsibilities. This isn't Starship Troopers. We aren't supposed to have a co-ed army fighting bugs on a battlefield to get your citizenship. Nick, you've actually brought hope to me with regards to the US military and the Marines. It sounds to me like you guys get what's going on, and you're depriving women of attention in the Marine Corps. And my hat's off to you guys. If men in other places could stop being manginas and stop giving women attention, then women wouldn't feel welcome there either, and their number would also drop somewhere between 5 to 10% max. The world would be a much better place overall if men gave women a lot less attention. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today.